January 17, 1950. What seemed like an ordinary night in Boston would become legendary. Beneath the surface of this quiet evening, 11 men driven by greed and ambition were about to pull off what many consider the crime of the century, one of the most meticulously planned robberies in U.S. history. In less than 35 minutes, they would vanish with over $30 million in today's money. This is the story of a heist that shook the nation, inspired one of Hollywood's most successful movies, and ultimately collapsed because of a single man's betrayal. This is the story of the great Brinks robbery, the real Ocean's 11. In the 1940s, there stood a well-known building in Boston, famous not for its historical significance, but because this particular structure functioned as a massive safe, holding millions of dollars in cash, checks, and other valuables. This building belonged to Brinks, a financial security company based in Boston, Massachusetts. At the time, the Brinks building was considered one of the most secure facilities in the entire country, an unbreakable fortress that no one dared to challenge. However, someone wasn't quite convinced. Anthony Pino, a career criminal known for petty thefts in Boston's North End, began entertaining the idea of breaking into Brinks in 1947. After months of gathering intelligence about the building, he realized one crucial fact. He couldn't pull this job off alone. He needed a team, but not just any team. Pino turned to Joseph McGinnis, a legend in Boston's Underworld, a man who commanded respect and knew the city's dark corners like the back of his hand. They needed muscle, so they brought in Joseph Specs, O'Keefe, and Stanley Gusciora, tough guys who could intimidate anyone. Vincent Costa, Pino's brother-in-law, would serve as the lookout. John Bannfield, a trusted associate of McGinnis, would be the getaway driver. To round out their team, they recruited James Ignatius Faherty, a master of armed robbery, along with Adolph Maffie, Michael Vincent Geagan, Thomas Francis Richardson, and Henry Baker. 11 men, each with their own skills and motivations, united by a shared hunger for a fortune that seemed impossible to obtain. Once the crew was assembled, Pino knew this heist would take months to plan properly. But he and his team had all the time in the world. Their plan needed to be perfect, a quick in-and-out operation with no evidence left behind. A perfect plan required carefully executed steps, from observation to establishing reliable alibis. The months leading up to the robbery were filled with meticulous planning. Pino studied the schedules, the shipments, the daily routines, even the way the lights flickered on and off. His biggest challenge? The money was on the second floor, protected by 5 locked doors. But Pino had a solution. He and his crew broke into the building after hours, stealing locked cylinders one at a time. They used these stolen cylinders to create duplicate keys, then carefully replaced the originals, leaving no trace of their intrusion. They even stole a green 1949 Ford stake body truck to serve as their escape vehicle. November and December were spent perfecting their getaway route, practicing until every turn and stop was ingrained in their minds. They designed their disguises with precision: navy pea coats, gloves, chauffeurs' caps, and rubber Halloween masks that completely concealed their faces. They made several attempts, getting close but always pulling back, waiting for the perfect moment. Finally, on January 17, 1950, they were ready. The crew met in Roxbury, loaded into the truck, and drove toward their target. Inside the Brinks depot, they moved with military precision. They forced the employees to the ground, bound their hands, and taped their mouths shut. In just 35 minutes, they had emptied the vault, filling bags with $1.5 million in cash and securities, worth over $15 million today. They vanished into the night, following their carefully planned escape route. Costa fled in a stolen sedan. Geagan established his alibi. Pino and Faherty quickly disappeared to create their own alibis, and Bannfield disposed of the truck, leaving no trace of their crime. They had pulled off what seemed like the perfect heist. Or so they thought. The federal statute of limitations was 3 years, but the state statute was 6. If they could just outlast that 6-year window, the money would be theirs, and they could never be brought to justice. The clock was ticking. Sirens wailed through the night. Within minutes of the robbery, police officers and FBI special agents descended upon the Brinks building, but they were met with chilling silence. The terrified employees couldn't provide useful information. They said the robbers were professionals, their movements studied and almost robotic. They spoke very little, leaving behind only a mask, tape, and one discarded hat. However, one employee did mention 4 guns, providing a serial number for one. The authorities had their first lead. 2 weeks later, a group of boys playing near the Mystic River found one of the stolen guns, rusted and useless. The next day, another gun was discovered by a police officer, also rendered useless by its terrible condition. Investigators began interviewing potential leads and past and present Brinks employees. Brinks even offered a $100,000 reward for information. Finally, people started talking. One witness described a green Ford truck with a canvas top parked near the Brinks building on the day of the heist. After a month of investigation, truck parts were discovered at a dump in Stoughton, Massachusetts, confirming the vehicle's identity. But this discovery only pointed to 2 men already on the authorities' radar, O'Keefe and Gusciora. When questioned, they claimed they had gone out drinking in Boston around 7 p.m. With no concrete evidence, the authorities had to let them go. But starting in June of that same year, things began to go south for Pino and his crew. For Pino's gang, robbing the Brinks building was extremely difficult to pull off, but what proved even harder was staying off the radar for 6 entire years. 2 crew members simply couldn't resist their criminal urges. O'Keefe and Gusciora kept going on what they called road trips, code for burglaries. During one of their Pennsylvania road trips, the duo was caught and arrested. O'Keefe was sentenced to 3 years, while Gusciora faced 5 to 20 years in prison. While they served their time, the FBI noticed a bizarre pattern. The 2 weren't writing to their families. Instead, they were corresponding with a group of men back in Boston, asking them to support their legal defense fund. This group included Pino, McGinnis, Maffie, and Baker, the same individuals questioned in the weeks following the robbery. Several months later, authorities knew something was suspicious. They immediately brought the group back for further questioning. Pino claimed he had been at home until about 7 p.m. before heading to a nearby liquor store owned by none other than Joseph McGinnis, a story confirmed by a Boston police officer who was present at the store. Maffie couldn't provide an alibi, but Baker insisted he was at home having dinner with his family before leaving at 7 p.m. for a 2-hour walk, during which he claimed to have encountered no one. Armed robbery specialist James Faherty claimed to have been out drinking between 5:10 p.m. and 7:45 p.m. John Bannfield said he had been drunk since New Year's Eve, yet an ex-girlfriend reported seeing him stone-cold sober on the night of the heist. If you haven't noticed, there's a clear pattern here. Around 7 p.m., each suspect had independently decided to change locations, making their whereabouts murky during the critical window of 7:10 p.m. to 7:27 p.m., the exact time of the heist. In prison, O'Keefe and Gusciora remained calm, revealing nothing to anyone. In November 1952, a federal grand jury convened to examine the case, as the federal statute of limitations was rapidly approaching. Authorities hoped this grand jury would elicit information from witnesses or the suspects themselves, but the jury had nothing concrete to work with. By January 1953, 3 years after the heist, the jury concluded there wasn't enough evidence to arrest anyone. Pino's crew was safe, but they still had 3 more years to go. Those 3 years felt like 3 decades for the crew. Over the next year, O'Keefe went in and out of jail, each time contacting the same group of men, pressuring them for financial help. Each time, the men grew more and more resentful. The air in Boston was thick with tension. March 1954 marked O'Keefe's return, and he wasted no time reuniting with the other suspects. 2 months later, O'Keefe, with a partner in tow, pulled an inexplicable move. They kidnapped Pino's brother-in-law, Costa, holding him captive in a hotel room. 2 days later, following payment of the ransom, they let Costa go. During police interviews, everyone claimed ignorance, but one thing was crystal clear. O'Keefe had become a liability and needed to be dealt with. On June 5, 1954, O'Keefe found himself at the center of the first assassination attempt. A suspicious car approached, and sensing danger, he instinctively slouched in his seat, narrowly dodging bullets that shattered his windshield. This was just the beginning. 2 days later, the second assassination attempt unfolded. This time, O'Keefe was shot in the chest, but somehow managed to survive. Realizing the danger he was in, he made the decision to flee Boston. However, his escape was short-lived as he was arrested for possessing a firearm, violating his parole. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Pino knew that with 10 associates eventually hunting him down, the odds weren't in his favor. In January 1955, getaway driver Bannfield died of natural causes. 1 down, 10 to go. While authorities felt they were closing in on the suspects, they still hadn't located any of the money. But they saw the tension within the group as an opportunity to get someone to talk. In prison, O'Keefe continued writing letters to other suspects, demanding financial support. With each ignored letter, his frustration grew. The clock was ticking. FBI agents, relentless in their pursuit, repeatedly visited O'Keefe, hoping to crack his silence. By December 1955, a shift occurred. O'Keefe's disdain for his former accomplices had reached a boiling point. On January 6, 1956, O'Keefe sat down with the agents and uttered the fateful words, "All right, what do you want to know?" Pino and his crew had waited 5 years, 11 months, and 20 days. They were just 11 days away from claiming the money as theirs. 11 days. On January 12th, the net closed in. Baker, Geagan, Maffie, Costa, McGinnis, and Pino were all apprehended. The following day, a Suffolk County grand jury issued indictments for the entire crew, using O'Keefe as their star witness. Faherty and Richardson fled, becoming fugitives on the FBI's most wanted list, but their escape was short-lived. They were caught hiding in a Dorchester apartment. Gusciora was transferred to a Massachusetts prison, where in July, he slipped and hit his head in his cell, dying a few hours later. 2 down, 9 to go. The trial of the remaining men began in Boston on August 6th. Each was sentenced to life imprisonment for armed robbery, with additional sentences ranging from 2 to 10 years for conspiracy, theft, and breaking and entering. O'Keefe was the only one to plead guilty. He received a more lenient sentence of just 4 years. 11 down. But there's one question we haven't answered yet. Where is the money? In June 1956, a man suspected of circulating counterfeit bills was apprehended by police in Baltimore. During the search, officers discovered over $1,000 in his possession. However, the investigation deepened when they found nearly $4,000 hidden in his hotel room. Among the cash recovered, police matched the serial numbers of $4,635 to those of the bills stolen in the infamous Great Brinks robbery. Under pressure, the man revealed the name of his associate, known as Fat Joe. Authorities swiftly tracked down Fat Joe, leading them to a concealed metal container hidden behind a wall panel. Inside this container lay piles of cash totaling nearly $60,000, all identified as part of the Brinks heist. Much of the money was found in a state of decomposition due to poor storage conditions. Despite these discoveries, over $1.1 million of the stolen money has remained missing to this day. The Great Brinks robbery of 1950 stands as a testament to both criminal ingenuity and human folly. What began as the perfect crime, meticulously planned over years with military precision, ultimately crumbled not because of superior police work, but because of the very human weaknesses that drive people to crime in the first place. Anthony Pino and his crew of 11 men had everything they needed: the skills, the plan, the patience, and the discipline. They had studied every detail, practiced every move, and executed their heist flawlessly. For nearly 6 years, they were untouchable. But greed, paranoia, and betrayal proved to be their undoing. O'Keefe's inability to lie low, his continued criminal activities, and ultimately his decision to cooperate with authorities in exchange for a lighter sentence, brought down what might have been the perfect crime. The irony is striking. They were just 11 days away from beating the statute of limitations when everything fell apart. 11 days from freedom, from keeping their fortune, from entering the history books as the criminals who got away with the crime of the century. Instead, they became a cautionary tale about how even the most brilliant criminal minds are ultimately human, with all the flaws and weaknesses that come with that humanity. Today, the story lives on not just in crime history, but in popular culture. It inspired countless heist films, including the famous Ocean's 11 franchise. The precision, the teamwork, the elaborate planning, all hallmarks of the modern heist genre can be traced back to this cold January night in Boston. And that missing $1 million? It's still out there somewhere, a tantalizing reminder that some mysteries remain unsolved, some treasures remain unfound, and some stories never truly end.